Know that President Trump understands the grave responsibility that a president and commander-in-chief bears. We saw this through his first term in the presidency, when he not only didn't start any new wars, he took action to de-escalate and prevent wars.
Welcome back to America Decides. You might remember Tulsi Gabbard. She ran for the Democratic nomination in 2020, stayed in the campaign longer than Kamala Harris, by the way, and then later endorsed President Biden in 2020. Now she's officially endorsed former President Trump. And today, Trump announced that Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would have prominent roles in his transition team should there be a need for one. Let us bring in our political panel, Deepa Shivaram and Stephanie Lai. Deepa is White House correspondent for NPR, Stephanie, national politics reporter for Bloomberg. So, Deepa, starting with you, what do you think, if anything, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. bring? I know they bring a kind of energy that's already in the Trump circle and the Trump orbit. Do they have any reach outside of that?
I mean, that's the question, right? This is coming as numerous Republicans are coming out and endorsing Kamala Harris. So that's the contrast that's being set up here. Tulsi Gabbard, obviously a former Democrat, as was RFK Jr. You could potentially interpret this as, you know, the Trump campaign saying, OK, we're also going to cast a wide net and reach out to voters who may not agree with us and open that door up. Will it have the same effect? I think that there's probably very few Democratic voters I've heard from who would say, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, she's really influenced the way I think about Democratic politics and the party writ large.
And Stephanie, they're not at the convention. That moment's long since passed. At the Democratic convention, there was a night built around Republicans who served in the Trump administration or elsewhere, said, I'm with Kamala, maybe only for just this one election, but I'm there nevertheless.
Right, and I think what we're seeing from the Harris campaign is that they don't think that the polling that they have suggests that RFK Jr. voters will turn out for Trump more than they would for Harris. And so while the Trump campaign says otherwise, it doesn't quite seem like there is consensus around how RFK Jr. will impact the vote. And on top of that, we don't actually know if he can get off of all of the ballots that he's trying to get off of.
An excellent point, Stephanie. Wisconsin late this afternoon announced that RFK Jr.'s name staying on the ballot. So is Jill Stein's. So is Cornel West. So all three of those are on the ballot in Wisconsin. And this raises, to me, Deepa, a larger conversation about, did the Trump campaign miss an opportunity to negotiate this out with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. earlier, when it could have mattered? He could have actually had more capability of taking names off ballots.
Right. I mean, but also keep in mind this world that we're living in where there is a Kamala Harris running for president is also very new and recent. So, you know, at a time when Donald Trump might have done that outreach to RFK Jr., Joe Biden might have been at the top of the ticket still. So we're still dealing with a lot of, you know, new territory here that clearly the Trump campaign is trying to navigate and trying to find ways to combat this surge of energy that has come with Kamala Harris taking the top of the ticket.
And Stephanie, we know they had conversations in Milwaukee, and Trump didn't think he needed RFK Jr. then. So they didn't hash out a deal.
They didn't.
Feels like he needs him now, or maybe he needs him more now.
Right, and so that's perhaps why we're seeing all of this come out right now. And in fact, you know, we're seeing the Trump campaign try to seize the spotlight back. And so this is just another part of that. Really, all of these events are building up to him trying to reassert himself on the narrative.
All right, I mentioned this at the top of the show. We don't need to dwell on this, but the debate's on.
The debates.
Deepa, go.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, exactly to what you just said, Stephanie. I think maybe an attempt from Donald Trump to keep his name coming up repeatedly in the headlines, which has been working. I mean, every time he sort of swings left or swings right on which direction we're going with the debates here, he sort of elevates the conversation. But at the same time...
Or animates it.
Animates it. At the same time, you know, you have Kamala Harris's campaign saying, you know, we're ready, we're showing up, and also kind of needling Donald Trump a little bit. I don't know if you saw her post on Truth Social. She went on his social media platform, basically, essentially calling Donald Trump a chicken. There was a video of clips of him with chicken noises in the background. So there's some, you know, ways that they're trying to sort of use this to their advantage as well.
Stephanie, I wonder if this is worth noting for more than a minute or two. The Democratic convention and Kamala Harris campaign seems to be less inclined to be triggered by Trump and outraged and appalled and more willing to engage in trolling, mockery, and dismissiveness.
I mean, that's actually something we saw from the Obamas as well. That wasn't necessarily the speech that I expected to hear from the both of them at the DNC. But the fact that the Harris campaign can tap into sort of the Gen Z voter, I think that's why we're seeing this trolling happening. And I think it suggests that there is a little bit more willingness to, you know, sling some mud.
And Deepa, is that about basically saying, look, we know the people who are scared of Donald Trump, who believe he's a monster, they're in the Democratic campaign, they were going to vote for Biden, now they're going to vote for Harris.
Right.
We don't need to talk to them anymore. What we need to do is talk to the ones who maybe either have tuned that out, are emotionally exhausted by it, and want some other kind of emotional response.
I think it's both and, right? I think the response is, they're looking to attract people who have been looking at our politics essentially since 2016, right? A politics of fear, a politics of a lot of despair, a lot of people feeling very unenthused and unenergized by what they see as two candidates who, quite frankly, are very unpopular, right? Joe Biden and Donald Trump were two extremely unpopular candidates on both sides of the aisle. They were looking for people who were saying, I'm gonna sit this one out. I'm going to stay on the couch. And there are a lot of folks you talk to who are Democrats who are saying this isn't just an election about Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. This is an election about the voters who are turning out and the voters who are saying, I'm picking the couch and I'm staying home. And Kamala Harris's mission, in addition to drawing those contrasts with Donald Trump, is also looking at those voters and saying, it's worth it to turn out and vote for me instead of just staying home this year.
Stephanie, you have some reporting about J.D. Vance and the tech world, which we all talked about in Milwaukee, that he would give Trump entree into this. Is one of the reasons Donald Trump Jr. said, hey, Dad, pick J.D. Vance. He's got a following in our world, but he also has this place of significance within the Silicon Valley part of the world that you don't really have access to. Is it making inroads? Is it doing something for the Trump campaign?
I think that's certainly something they've been very focused on. The fact that Trump has made a big play on crypto and, in fact, has drawn some crypto donations from high-profile people.
And when you say make a big play, speaking of it more
right, on the trail. He's
favorably,
yes,
and suggesting perhaps a more accepting regulatory environment for crypto should he be returned to the White House.
Correct. That, in addition to J.D. Vance hosting these fundraisers with big tech names like David Sachs, Jacob Hellberg, these folks are really drawing in a new energy of Trump supporters. And I think they're suggesting that there is a shift happening in San Francisco where these donors are not just sitting on the sidelines or not donating to the Democratic Party as they have in previous cycles, and instead they're starting to come out of the woods a little bit.
Deepa, what does the Harris campaign polls internally, so far as you know about them, tell them about the status of this race?
I mean, there were operatives in Chicago at the DNC who were saying, look, this isn't the rosy picture that, that is being painted by some people. Yes, there's a lot of enthusiasm. Yes, there's a lot of energy, and there's good signs in that. But there are folks who are within this campaign, who are working with this campaign, who will say this is an extremely tight race. There are some states that Kamala Harris is up in and some that she needs to win that currently she's not up in, and they still have a lot of ground to cover. And I think the candidate herself is really aware of that, right? You heard her in Chicago wrap up her convention speech on Thursday night, immediately go rally with supporters and say, celebrate tonight, but you got to get to work tomorrow. This is not an election that is a done deal yet.
Not even close. Deepa Shivaram and Stephanie Lai, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.